Once upon a time, in a small village at the foot of a great mountain, there lived a young man named Elias. He was not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the smartest among his peers. But he had one thing that set him apart, a burning desire to push himself beyond his limits. The people of the village often spoke of the mountain's peak, a place no one had ever reached. Many had tried, but all had failed, turning back halfway defeated by exhaustion or fear. Elias, however, decided that he would be the one to conquer it. Elias knew that such a journey would not be easy. He had no special training, no extraordinary strength. But he believed that the human spirit was capable of far more than most people ever realized. He began preparing in small ways. Every morning he woke up before sunrise and ran through the hills, pushing himself to go farther each day. At first his legs ached and his lungs burned, but he refused to stop. He reminded himself that discomfort was only temporary, but the strength he would gain would last. One day, as he was running, an old man from the village noticed him and asked, "Why do you push yourself so hard, Elias? The mountain is too high, and the path is too dangerous. No one has ever reached the top." Elias paused, breathing heavily, and replied, "Because I must know what I am capable of. If I do not try, I will always wonder." The old man nodded slowly and said, "Then remember this, the body obeys the mind. If you believe you can go farther, you will." With those words in his heart, Elias continued his training. He climbed smaller hills, carrying heavy stones to build his strength. He practiced enduring hunger and thirst, knowing that the mountain would not provide comfort. He studied the stories of those who had failed, learning from their mistakes. He realized that many had given up not because their bodies failed, but because their minds had convinced them it was impossible. The day finally came when Elias felt ready. He packed only the bare essentials, some food, a rope, and a small knife. The villagers gathered to watch him begin his ascent. Some whispered that he would fail like the others, but Elias ignored them. He took his first step onto the rocky path, his eyes fixed on the distant peak. The climb was harder than he had imagined. The air grew thinner, making every breath a struggle. His muscles screamed in protest, and his hands bled from gripping the sharp rocks. More than once he slipped and nearly fell. Doubt crept into his mind. Maybe the old man was wrong, he thought. Maybe I am not strong enough. But then he remembered his own words. I must know what I am capable of. He pressed on, forcing himself to take one more step, then another and another. When his body begged him to rest, he rested, but only for a moment. He refused to let comfort become his enemy. Hours turned into days. His food ran low, and his strength waned, but he could see the peak now, closer than ever before. On the final stretch, a storm rolled in. The wind howled, and icy rain stung his skin. The path ahead vanished in the mist. Elias crouched behind a boulder, shivering. Part of him wanted to wait for the storm to pass, but another part knew that if he stopped now, he might never start again. He stood up, facing the wind, and began climbing. Hand over hand, foot over foot, he inched forward. His fingers were numb, his vision blurred, but he refused to surrender. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm cleared. The clouds parted, and Elias saw it, the peak, just a few steps away. With the last of his strength, he pulled himself up and stood at the summit, breathing in the thin, cold air. He had done it. He had pushed himself beyond what he thought was possible. As he looked down at the village below, so small from this height, he understood something profound. Limits were not walls to stop him. They were challenges to overcome. The body could endure far more than the mind believed, but only if the mind allowed it. When Elias returned to the village, he was not the same person. He carried himself differently, not with pride, but with quiet confidence. The villagers asked him how he had succeeded where so many had failed. He simply said, "I refuse to accept that I had limits." Years later, others began attempting the climb, inspired by his story. Some succeeded, some failed, but all of them learned the same truth Elias had discovered, that the only true limits were the ones they placed upon themselves. And so, the mountain became more than just a physical challenge. It became a symbol of what the human spirit could achieve when pushed beyond its comfort. Elias's story spread far and wide, reminding people that greatness was not reserved for the strongest or the fastest, but for those who refused to give up. The lesson was clear. If you want to push yourself beyond your limits, you must first believe it is possible. Then you must act, not in giant leaps, but in small, persistent steps. The body will resist, the mind will doubt. But if you keep going, you will find strength you never knew you had. And when you stand at the peak of your own mountain, you will understand limits were only ever an illusion.